Alright, so we finally made it to another MCU film, and with the release of Deadpool and Wolverine, it's time I rank my top 5 favorite MCU films. Hey there, and welcome to the channel. My name is Gil, and today we're counting down my top 5 favorite MCU films. Now, before we get to the list, I want to go over some rules so that you know exactly what my guidelines are going into this. So the first rule is that we're counting down movies that are only made by Marvel Studios, starting with Iron Man from 2008 all the way until now. Which brings me to rule number 2. None of the movies that have been retconned into the MCU counted, such as the Fox Studio films or the Sony Studio films like Spider-Man 1, Spider-Man 2, X-Men, Fantastic Four. Unfortunately, those were made for separate reasons and then were brought into the MCU, so they don't technically count. And that brings us to our third rule. Sadly, no Sony adjacent films will be included on this list. I'm sorry, Madame Web. I mean, it's not like you're going to make the list anyway, but Madame Web is disqualified. Same thing with Morbius and all the other Sony properties that were filmed after the blip. To start off this list, let's go over some honorable mentions. Films that barely missed the cut. Starting with Black Panther, Captain America, Civil War, Avengers Endgame, and Spider-Man No Way Home. If this was a top 10 list, all 4 of those movies would have made it, but unfortunately, I had to narrow this down to 5 choices, and it was like picking my favorite children. It was really difficult, so sadly, those 4 will not be making it. To start this list, we're going to get a little spicy with 2012's The Avengers, directed by Joss Whedon. Marvel's The Avengers was a cinematic masterpiece and an experience you had to visit in the theaters for yourselves. It was the first time that we've ever seen anything as ambitious as a crossover like this. Seeing Iron Man, Thor, Captain America, the Hulk, all on screen in one single frame is something that I'll never forget, and I'll always remember where I was when I first watched this movie. This is one of those films where I went to the theater multiple times to watch it over and over again. I had to take everyone to see it, and it definitely set the stakes for what was to come for the MCU going forward. The other thing that this movie did was it revolutionized the way that movie making was made. Being one of the very few billion-dollar films, this film set the precedent of what comic book films could achieve if they had the right coordination and the right creative team behind it. At number 4, Avengers Infinity War. There were actually 2 films that vied for this spot, Thor Ragnarok and Avengers Infinity War. I went with Infinity War because of one big reason, Thor Love and Thunder. Why, you might ask? I think it's because Thor Love and Thunder makes Thor Ragnarok a weaker film because of it. The journey that Thor goes on in Thor Ragnarok is pretty special until you realize, oh, the comedic chops and stylings of Taika Waititi kind of wear themselves out with Thor Love and Thunder, and the character becomes a joke again, reverting his character back to what it was before Thor Ragnarok. And because of that, I gotta give the edge to Avengers Infinity War. Much like what I said about The Avengers, Avengers Infinity War had the ambition there that the original Avengers had, except on a much greater scale. This is the first time that we got to see Thanos in action, and this was really his movie, his time to shine, and the gut punch of an ending is one that I'll always remember. The rest of the theater fell silent as the snap happened. It was spectacular to watch, and it's probably the last time that we'll see an Avengers movie where they actually lose in that fashion. It was funny, it was action-packed, there was not a minute wasted, and I firmly feel like Avengers Infinity War was the best Avengers movie that we got. At number 3, Iron Man. We go back to where it all started with 2008's Iron Man, directed by Jon Favreau. The inspired casting of Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man set the linchpin for what this franchise was going to become. Iron Man was spectacular on so many levels. They took a character that was regarded as a B-lister and brought him to AAA status, elevated by Robert Downey Jr.'s charismatic, endearing performance as the cocky Tony Stark. If there was ever a character and a single film to build around, this was it. Marvel caught lightning in a bottle and they ran with it. Without the inspired casting of Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark, I don't know if the MCU would have ever been as big as it was, especially what we see at the end of Avengers Endgame and what this character ends up doing. The bar was set really high with Iron Man, and the first time we see Nick Fury rise out of the shadows to announce the Avengers Initiative, everyone erupted because we knew what that meant. Iron Man is one of those other films that I'll always remember where I was when I first watched it, and I'll never forget the experience that I had. At number 2, we have Captain America, The Winter Soldier. The Winter Soldier is number 1 on pretty much everyone's list, but for me it falls just short, but almost quite there. The Winter Soldier revolutionized the MCU. It took it in a much more serious tone. For the first time in his life, Captain Rogers is questioning everything he knew about the American government and S.H.I.E.L.D. There's a lot of political intrigue, backstabbing. It is very much a political thriller more than an action comic book movie. And because of the genre twist, this film holds up really well. I could watch this movie over and over again as a standalone film, and it will not ever get tiring for me. The villain of the story is also really well done. Robert Redford came on board to play this head of S.H.I.E.L.D. that's secretly sabotaging the government and working for Hydra. It's inspired casting because an actor of his caliber hasn't done a movie like this. Robert Redford gives the movie credibility and much more gravitas than what's been led to. This is a film very much in the vein of Patriot Games and all these other political thrillers that we've seen from the 90s, set in a modern era with modern action tropes, and I love it. This is the best Captain America film that we've ever seen, and it will never be topped. And at number 1, we have Guardians of the Galaxy. That's right, folks. At number 1, my favorite MCU film of all time is Guardians of the Galaxy by James Gunn. They took characters that I never give a shit about as comic book characters, and now they're household names across millions of families everywhere. The Guardians of the Galaxy is the most beloved property of the MCU at this point. With Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, James Gunn cemented that this trilogy is really solid. It's one of the better ones in the entire MCU, and these characters will endure long after the MCU is over. But what I love about this movie isn't just the characters and the attitude. It's about the tone, the vibes, the music, the production design. I could watch this movie a million times. It's hands down one of my favorite, and it stands alone. You don't need to watch any of the other 20 MCU films to understand what these characters are, what they mean to one another, and where they're at the end of their journey of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1. It also has one of the most emotional endings of any of the MCU films, when Star-Lord puts on his headset and listens to the tape that his mom left him one last time. I love this film. I'm probably going to go watch it after I'm done with this, but it's one that I hope is on your guys' top 5. And there we have it. Those are my 5 favorite MCU films of all time. Do they align with your 5? Be sure to roast me in the comment section down below. I just know it's coming. Be sure to follow and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a review or an episode like this. And be sure to scan the QR code if you want to join our Discord, where you could join in on the discussions with film, television, sports, and video games. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section, and I will be back for my Deadpool and Wolverine review. I want to thank you all for watching, and go catch a movie.